Hi, my name is Maud Sayers. I'm a second year international relations student at King's College London. And this episode, I'm going to talk about my work with Arts for Refugees as part of my internship with BizGs and the article I wrote on the dilemma faced by Syrian refugees, whether to return home after the fall of the Assad regime or to stay where many of them have rebuilt their lives. So I'll start a little bit about myself and how I ended up here. So I'm a British national, but I grew up in France and came to the UK to go to university, and I'm currently doing a semester abroad at the University of Sydney. I came across this internship through the War Studies department at King's, and what drew me to it was the focus on storytelling and how that differs from academic writing, but also especially about storytelling on displacement and identity and looking at the human level of the world. And so I've always been interested in global issues, but as I said, more specifically in the human side of them, so how big political events actually shape people's everyday lives. So I feel like BizGs and Arts for Refugees were definitely spaces where stories weren't just statistics, but something more personal. I chose to write about post-conflict Syria. So the Syrian war is something that most people are aware of, but I think quite in often quite distant way, which was, I think, me before writing this article. So what was interesting to see was what happens after the headlines have faded away and we actually look at these numbers as people. And it's a conflict that a lot of us, Gen Z, have grown up hearing about, as it started in 2011 and only ended in 2024. So this article is called "To Return or Not to Return: The Dilemma Faced by Syrian Refugees Post-Conflict," and it's writing about the idea that return isn't as simple as it sounds, because I think we often assume that when a war ends, people just go home, that it's an obvious decision, but for a lot of Syrians, it's not that easy. So the article opens with the story of Khalid al-Shatta, who returned to Syria after 13 years. So he described his return as a choice, as something that wasn't automatic, but something that had to be chosen. And I thought that was quite interesting, and I found that it was a lot of Syrians' experience as well. So since the fall of Assad in December 2024, over 1 million Syrians have returned. That sounds like a lot, but there are many, many millions of Syrians who haven't come back to Syria. So why is that? So Syria has been physically and economically devastated. Much of the basic services and infrastructure needed for basic needs are not available, and they have been destroyed, just absent. So when people return, they're not going back to their life as they knew it. They're going back to neighbourhoods that have been leveled by rubble. They have been completely unrecognisable. So I looked at some research that was around the International Rescue Committee, and who surveyed over 17,000 Syrians that were in 4 different countries about whether or not they intended to go back. So only 29% of Syrian refugees said that they intended to go back, and many of them, the majority, 37%, were unsure, and 34% said that they didn't intend to return. So a lot of them are weighing, a lot of Syrian refugees are uncertain and are weighing up 2 imperfect options. So there's the joy of the homecoming, even when it's a home that is different to the one we remember. And there's also the lives that they have built in their countries. So over 80% of Syrian refugees have been in their host countries for over a decade. So that's the time to build a whole new life, career, maybe a family, a lot of Syrian refugees have had children who have grown up in a different school system, and some of these children don't feel like they have much belonging to Syria at all. Some have become citizens. 143,000 Syrian refugees became citizens of Germany. So as well as Syria having changed, it's the people who have changed as well. Anas Modamani, who was 17 when he fled Syria, and to go to Germany now describes having two homes, two heartlands, and being torn between Damascus and Berlin. But it can also be a good thing. So now he has two homes instead of one, and that's how he sees it. But for those who do return, many of them don't return permanently, and some people go back temporarily, especially if they have dual citizenship or the financial means to go back and forth. So they're in an in-between space. They're neither really here nor there. But then there's also the political dimension. So in Europe especially, there's growing pressure on Syrian refugees to return. Some governments argue that if the original reason for asylum no longer exists, then people should go back. But that ignores the reality, the harsh reality on the ground in Syria, and also the lives that people have built. So refugees are often caught in a difficult position between a country that isn't ready for them and countries that may no longer want to keep them. One thing I also found particularly important is the role of remittances. So many Syrians abroad are supporting family members still inside Syria. So if they're pushed to return prematurely, it doesn't just affect them, it affects entire households who rely on that support in Syria. So in terms of what I learnt from writing this article, I think the biggest takeaway for me is how misleading the idea of post-conflict can be. It suggests quite a clean break that once the conflict ends, recovery begins. But for people on the ground, it's a lot messier than that. So I also like how the concept of home really is, and how it's not just about a place, it's about your stability, your identity, and ultimately it's a choice. So finally, I think this topic made me also more aware of how policy discussions often overlook individual experience. So decisions about returning are deeply personal, but they're also shaped by forces that people can't control. So like the conditions in Syria, the politics of the host countries, and general international relation forces in between countries. So yeah, it was very enlightening, and I want to thank you all for listening.